this is a plantar flexion technique. So basically it's going to be mimicking the action of our calf, Achilles tendon, and even doing some work of the plantar fascia, because we're going to shorten this foot up and provide some resistance to that foot lengthening out as well. So may be appropriate for some of our Achilles tendinopathy, some of our muscle strains through the calf as well. We tend to use the adhesive spray through these hollow areas, as they're areas that tapes tend not to like sticking. Depending on the amount of force you need, how reactive it is, if it's a tendinopathy, or how acute the muscle tear is, the size of the person, the work they're going to do with it, we may need a single layer or a double layer. Occasionally, very occasionally, you may even use a triple layer. Here we have a double layer power band that we're going to use, and then we're going to put a cover strip over the top of that with the wider tape. So we're going to start on the foot, just ensuring that we leave enough space around to get our cover strip over the top. We then need to get them in the short position, so that's going to be that full plantar flexion. You can come in and just block them with your shoulder, and then we're going to come down, maintaining that full plantar flexion and running through. Now, if it's a muscle tear, we may want to bring in our soft tissue offload, our boxing technique through here, in which case we're going to create a bit of an anchor, pull them out a little bit so we can really maximally gather up all that soft tissue, and then have a nice anchor point once again without any tension. We can then come in and just make sure we're sticking down nicely around that Achilles tendon. We can give a light spray just to improve the adhesion to that first layer. And then we can come in with our cover strip over the top. Sometimes it's useful to cut a wedge out before you start, or we can simply cut that out afterwards if the tape's gathering up around that heel. So once again, this is going to be fixed to skin on all sides of the underneath layer, so it locks everything down, holds that well, stops anything from delaminating. Again, make sure you're in that fully shortened position, so maximally plantar flex them and run down. Keep your tension on. Once again, we're going to run down and finish above the end of that first piece. Don't cross the knee joint. It's not usually necessary to be doing both joints. Now here, where we create this little overlap or crease here, we can just create a little dog ear by squeezing that together, and then carefully we can come in, just apply a little bit of traction and cut that off. Now if it is a muscle tear, we could bring in our boxing, we can bring in our longitudinal strips, even cross hatching for those really acute muscle tears. If it's an Achilles tendinopathy, we might want to try to create some sort of boxing or soft tissue offload around the tendon. We know that tendons don't like that combination of tensile load or overwork, which is what we're trying to take some load out of here, and that compressive load. We need to load the tendons to get recovery, but often just normal function is overloading, so this allows us to manage the load and get them putting some normal functional stress through the tendon to build capacity of that tendon. It is a good idea to lock over the ankle or over the heel here, as well as through the foot, just to ensure good adhesion. And if it is a plantar fasciitis, it's a good idea just to bring this in and maybe lift up a little bit as you come through. So if it's a tendinopathy and they're predominantly tender on the inside or that medial aspect, I'm going to start laterally. And then as I come through, I'm going to anchor, pull all that soft tissue up together, and then stick it down with another nice anchor point. And we can see it starts to bunch up all of that soft tissue once again. To lock off over the foot. Come in. And then just a little bit of a turn into a bit more inversion. Just make sure you don't continue up across the ankle pulling into dorsiflexion. Our aim is to be pulling into plantar flexion or doing some of that, creating some of that plantar flexion force. So we don't want to counter that with dorsiflexion. Now that the foot is resting in full plantar flexion, so as soon as we start to move, we're creating resistance to that dorsiflexion moment and then that assistance back. What you'll also notice is that the tape here has to stretch quite a long way sideways, which is why we have that sideways stretch to allow full range of motion without any restriction. So if it's the muscle tear, we can bring in this boxing, and there are lots of ways to do it. We may just do it longitudinally. We can do some C shapes if it's late stage and they're not bruising or swelling through here, as that allows us to box transversely and longitudinally. Or early on, we tend to go for this crosshatch type of idea. So we'll start laterally above where the issue is, anchor on one side, pull everything together, tension on, and then stick down with a nice anchor point again. We can then come with a longitudinal one. If it is early on, we try to keep them as close together as possible, and that'll just help resolve the bruising and the swelling. So anchor, pull everything up once again, and then anchor point at the top. And then we just repeat and make a weave or a crosshatch sort of pattern. So anchor, tension on, and then anchor. And just make sure that you finish below the level of the tear. Once again, there's a lot of overlapping, so hold that really well to ensure good adhesion.